Deer Talk Now coming at you once again. I am Daniel Schmidt. We've been doing this for quite a long time. Ian, how long?
Like two. I mean, the new podcast.
The new podcast
like 3 years
is
now.
3 years, and we're at this is number.
I think this is going to be like 130 something.
130 something, but this dates back to 2012, before anybody had a podcast, and then we were doing them live with telephone wires and all that kind of stuff. But thank you for joining us. All we ask you to do is like and subscribe. Wherever you're listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, go to YouTube. We are just cranking them there. And we also put all the shorts there on YouTube, the short versions of we cut this up into 1 million pieces, and Facebook and Instagram. Just like deer and deer hunting, and you're going to get it for free. That's all we ask. Today we have a special guest again, Zach Haas. Zach is a land management specialist from our home state of Wisconsin, but he works all over the place. Zach, welcome to the program.
Happy to be here.
We are so happy to have you here, and I'm going to pepper you. I'm over caffeinated this morning. I'm going to pepper you with lots of things because a guy with your background, and we're going to put links in there to Zach's background and his website, but he is a land management specialist. He's an aquatic biologist, specializes in food plots, hinge cutting, tree planting, all the stuff that you guys know that I love to do. Apple trees, my goodness. He's got to teach me how to get apple cedar rust out of my orchards because I can't deal with it anymore. But we're going to start with you, Zach. We're going to give a background first. Okay, so you went to college, many years ago. Well, not as many years ago as I did. And you got a degree in aquatic biology?
Yeah, so I got my degree was in biology, and so freshwater sciences as well as water resource management.
And you worked in that for 20 years, didn't you?
Yeah, so close to 20 years. Yeah, I was a senior aquatic biologist, handling anything from your small little 10th acre ponds all the way up to 1,500, 2,000 acre lakes.
Wow. That's crazy. So was it mostly fish related, or was it just like basically the whole ecosystem?
Like I used to tell everyone is pretty much we did everything except for dig a hole. So, we did everything from nutrient abatement, we did invasive species control, fish stocking, aeration systems, a lot of aquatic planting, stuff of that nature. But a lot of it usually housed around the whole principle of aging ponds. So making sure we could turn the clock on Mother Nature and making these beautiful, pristine, healthy ponds.
That's fascinating stuff. And now you've taken, you've kind of gone on to your own. You started your own company, and you're doing management. And I know you're a big deer hunter, so now you're using a lot of your expertise to help deer hunters.
Yeah, absolutely. So back in actually 2015, my late father and I, we actually started Creek Bottom Land Management. It was just, we were in the driveway together, and he goes, Zach, you're a smart individual. You love deer hunting. That's all I have ever really been super, super passionate about. He goes, why don't you do the two together? So I started Creek Bottom Land Management with my niche of water, and then it just kind of started to go down the train tracks that way.
That is awesome. I know you're based here in Wisconsin, but you've worked all over the country?
Absolutely, yeah. So I cover a lot of the Midwest, but I've helped in, even individuals with deer hunting like in New York, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi. So I do a lot of more virtual consults that way. I've actually met a lot of gentlemen. I go hunting in Kansas quite a bit, and I met a lot of people through an outfitter there I hunt with. That's
a good segue, but before I get to Kansas, you got to keep that in the back of your minds for a second. Kansas is the segue. But you also work with a partner of ours, Rack Fuel, is mostly a food plot company, but they also have attractants. We call them stim tractants.
Yep.
And you've worked with them on some of their food plot seed production?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've known Tom Lester there since 2010 now, so it's hard to believe that it's been that long.
My goodness, 2010, we're talking about, like, that's ancient history, but it's almost 15 years, but go ahead.
And so I got started with him because I used to have a hunting television show, and that's how we started, was when he had monster racks. And when it kind of came into fruition that I started this and doing work, and Rack Fuel kicked up, Tom actually approached me and asked, hey, would you help design some of these food plot blends? And I jumped all over that. I'm a nerd when it comes to any kind of food plot deer hunting stuff related, so I was all about helping to develop these food plot blends.
We're going to talk about that. That is fascinating. I'm completely fascinated because I'm not just saying this because these guys are a partner of ours. Best food plots I've ever had, and the deer are just hammering them. I can't seem to kill one yet, but not here at home, but great plots. What I want to talk about is a topic that is popped up again, super relevant today in 2024, and that's epizootic hemorrhagic disease. I know you have some background with this, but my first question for you, and this, I'm trusting you're going to get this right because no one has given me an answer. Where, not how, where, I know how it's transmitted. Yeah. Where does the EHD virus come from?
So the EHD virus itself, obviously, it's a bloodborne illness. And, a lot of the research never truly showed where it came from. But back, I think the first case was 1955, New Jersey.
I wrote this down, by the way.
Yeah, so that was the first case. And then they didn't really see it for
62.
Another. Yeah, so,
7 years.
How can something go dormant for that long? So there's not a lot of good old data on it. And I would even argue there's not a lot of good new data either. With that said, so to me, it's like a lot of this stuff. Was it always there, and then we finally put a name to it? That would be my guess. With a lot of these viruses, it's just that it was there. We've seen deer die, and then suddenly you go, oh, let's see what it is, and then we found out that was a bloodborne actual virus.
It's a bloodborne virus. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. It's often, I don't say confused, but there's two viruses, right? There's the EHD virus and the blue tongue virus.
Correct.
Pretty much the same things.
I usually use them pretty interchangeably. They are different, but they're still passed the same way.
And you are correct. 1955 in New Jersey, 62 in Alberta, then a huge, and those were just, hundreds of deer. 1976, a massive, Nebraska, Wyoming, Kansas, which you talked about. That was my segue. The Dakotas, New Jersey, deer and antelope, thousands of them. They said like 4,000, 14,000. I don't know what the exact number was. They found dead from this virus. And it's been pretty cyclical, probably because of climate.
Yeah, obviously climate change is a thing. It's well documented. But with that said, to me it's a lot of agriculture based practices. We're expanding, getting rid of a lot of different habitats. For instance, even our home state, Wisconsin, we look at southwestern Wisconsin. We've lost a lot of our trout streams due to agriculture production. Not doing BMP practices and all these different things to improve the water. And so to me, it's a overlook of water quality, and that's why I've kind of really
fascinating
dove into it so deep, is because that was my baby, is water. And that was, to me, the link is we've cared less and less about water and about everything else, about food plots and crop production, ripping out tree rows, all this stuff, but we forgot about the water. And that's why I think we're seeing it escalate.
And this year, and I want everybody to comment if you've been seeing it in your area, but I've heard from guys from Michigan and Indiana and Kentucky and Iowa, big time in Iowa, right?
Yep.
How bad is it where have you heard the worst cases?
So all those, but also I would say Iowa and actually Ohio. Ohio's getting hit really hard. Just recently I was talking to a group out of there that they've never seen it before, but now all these deer are showing up nonstop. So the entire Midwest is getting slammed this year.
Slammed with EHD. So what happens is, and the other thing, okay, so you were going back to, where did it originate? I want to know, we know that it's a midge. It's a no-see-um, a punky, whatever you want to call it, tiny little fly. Lives in the banks of creeks and ponds and stuff like that, water sources. Deer come in there to drink because it's hot and it's maybe a drought situation. And that bug goes and bites a deer, bites another deer, and it starts infecting all those deer in there. But how does the midge become infected with the virus?
Yeah, so to me, it's the same principle of, you talk about swimmer's itch, same thing. So it's always in the environment, always.
Okay.
It's never gone.
So it's in the banks of the ponds, and
essentially to me, it's like Lyme's disease too.
Okay.
It's always in the bug population at some percentage. It's just that when we get these really bad, like this drought is unreal we're going through right now, but now you're bringing everything so close and condensing that. Well, you just made it worse. Instead of having water all over where maybe this deer might have got it, maybe that deer, because there's water everywhere. Now we're going into it. All the midges are going to hatch into one zone. So let's say, just throwing a number out there, let's say 50% of the midge population has the EHD virus. Well, now you just put it all into one water hole. The rate of deer getting it just went through the roof.
That's crazy. So when the midge bites a deer, is it is it from it infects that deer?
Yep.
And then does the same midge go and bite another deer, and that's how it spreads?
Yeah, so the female midge of the Culicodes midge is essentially biting the deer and transmitting it. So she needs blood in order to make the next hatch happen. So she's going to constantly do that cycle of biting other deer and getting blood, transmitting disease, and then putting it down into their and hatching a new supply, you could say. But yeah, she's going to bite as many deer as possible until get that blood supply to get the next hatch.
And we also know that it can wipe out entire age classes of mature bucks because, for the most part, again, correct me if I'm wrong here. This is just my years of trying to understand this. You get to August, you have a bachelor group of just say all 3 and 4 year olds. They come in, they're thirsty, they're drinking, they all get bit. So that's one reason why you're seeing a lot of mature bucks being killed. The other reason, could it not be because you have mature bucks with velvet antlers, a rich supply of blood still, easy target for a midge to bite?
Yeah, especially just think about if you go at night with a thermal and you would look at deer with, their velvet on, that's a giant blood supply. So, and what you'd think is when they're drinking, where's that blood supply? Right by that water. So all it takes is that midge to jump up, bite into that velvet, transmit the disease, done deal. That deer has it, and now you're talking 15 days, that deer's dead. It's so quick.
What's the worst case you ever saw, like in a region?
So actually, personally, I had it happen where I had picked up a lease actually in Northwest Missouri back in 2012, and that was a bad year too. It was 2007 to 2012. And I remember going down there and we had, monsters. Like we're throwing names on deer like Godzilla and all this stuff. I'm like, this is awesome. 180-inch deer. And we got closer season and suddenly the cameras just dried up. I'm like, what's going on? We just had picked up this 1 year lease. Well, I started talking to a gentleman across the road, had essentially a full section, 640 acres. And he goes, we estimate about 80% of our deer are dead. And that was across the whole spectrum. So then I'm going, okay. So we start going our ditch lines, and sure enough, dead deer everywhere. Yeah, so that was one of the worst ones I've been personally involved in or impacted by, and it was insane how fast it happened.
It was a killer year that year. I know some of our friends in the industry who have land TV shows just were hammered that year. How would you compare? I know 2007 was a bad year. 2012 was a bad year. How would you compare 2024, this current year, with one of those so far? Yeah,
I was probably the closest to getting there. I still don't think we're quite in that realm of like what 2012 was, because I think it took those places over 5 years to even rebuild their deer herds. I don't think we're that bad. Are deer dead all over? Absolutely, nonstop. But I think if this drought kind of keeps continuing and we don't get the frosts, we could see it start getting to that rate.
So you did talk about that. Nice segue there. Frost kills that bug.
Yep.
And basically just stops that virus for this year then.
Yep, correct.
And the other thing too, this is Kansas. We'd have to go back. This was a TV show that we did, and I can't remember. Maybe Ian can find it. I was hunting and I shot a buck that was an EHD survivor. It had a huge club foot.
Yep.
Is that common?
Yeah, so if they actually survive the EHD, and it's actually more common down south, but what you'll find is, the deer hoof is just like a fingernail, right? So it's going to keep growing. And what you'll find sometimes is that hoof where the EHD happened is going to be damaged, hollow sometimes, and riskily they'll wear it off eventually, But with that said, you'll see that fine line where they started recovering, and that's where the hoof is healthy again. But yeah, you'll see where an old hoof sheath is almost over the new hoof.
This thing was like a loaf of bread. He could barely walk. That's why I shot him, because I felt so bad
absolutely.
For him. But I should back up, because for some people who don't know, let's go back to the bad situations. I know guys in Michigan. And by the way, when you guys type in your comments, if you have EHD, just give us the county and the state. We just would like to have a working idea of what you guys are seeing. But in the bad situation, when EHD is really hitting hard, what is the timeline between that deer getting bit and that deer potentially dying?
So the first signs typically are within 3 to 5 days from getting that bite. That'll be when you start seeing a deer. The best way to put it is almost seems depressed, head down, just kind of walking, milling around. And then at about that 15-day, 2-week cycle, that's when you're starting to see deer going to water, getting the high fevers, and you're start seeing them die. So it's a quick quick window.
And what I do know this, but I want you to say it. What is the biology? What's going on? What's killing that deer?
Yeah, so really what's happening is when that disease is going through that blood, obviously it's a pathogen through the bloodstream. So the deer's going, okay, I got to heat up my body essentially, and I got to start killing this off. No different than we would as a human. We're going to get a fever and we get a flu or whatever it might be, something. So that fever's starting to start kicking in, give them the dehydration. It starts shutting down receptors, and before you know it, it's just pretty much almost making them, in a way, brain dead. And then they're kind of a walking zombie.
So that's the zombie deer. I mean, I don't mean to say that facetiously,
Yeah.
but everybody, I would say the preponderance of people that I see on social media today see video clips of deer with EHD, and they're saying, oh my gosh, that has to be chronic wasting disease. Two completely separate diseases.
100%.
Have you ever seen a deer with chronic wasting disease?
I have personally not. I have friends in the southwest area of our state that have seen it. I have personally not seen them. We haven't had the issue yet by us.
Same here. And I'm not saying that doesn't exist. That's a topic for another show. But most times, and there are other things too. I mean, there are other viral diseases deer get, just weird things that deer get, that they act sluggish, that they act not afraid of humans. It's not necessarily EHD, but if you're in an area with AHD, could be a very good chance that's what you're seeing
100%.
right now.
100%. I mean, when they get that fever, for instance, such a high fever too. I mean, it's killing. It's breaking down the proteins of the brain and everything to a point where it doesn't know it's a deer anymore.
We've seen some really just amazing video, almost horrifying, of deer jumping into rivers. It's like they just must be burning up inside.
Yep. 100%. Yep.
Must be what's happening.
Yep.
And they're just trying to they're trying to survive, and they just can't. This is I could talk about this all day long because it's so fascinating. But the other thing that I did, I wanted to mention, because I will take things and go down different rabbit holes, but you might not know this yet, but I do. When people talk about CWD, they get freaked out. Oh my gosh, I would never eat a deer with CWD, blah, 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 blah. Well, deer with EHD, nobody really talks about that.
Yep.
And they're like, if you shot one and you didn't even know it has it, well, here are some of the things. They could have fluid in their lungs. They could die of a cardiac hemorrhage. They could have a congested rumen. There's all sorts of things that they could have going on inside, but somehow, I think most people don't, whatever. They might not even think about it. Of course, if it's to that clinical stage where the deer's literally dying in front of you, you're probably not going to eat it. But I want people to understand that deer diseases have been around longer than I've been around, longer than you've been around, longer than any of us been around. It's just something you have to educate yourself on what it is, how it works, and that it's actually part of a deer's life.
Absolutely.
Okay, this is awesome. I want to just make sure that I got... you hit just about everything I wanted to ask you. Okay, so we talked about whitetails, and I know that it killed antelope in those early cases.
Yep.
Have you heard of any other like antelope or other ruminants like elk or anything that have
Bighorn
sheep?
Bighorn sheep are vastly affected as well. Same with mule deer, obviously too. But yeah, like bighorn, and that's why in a way I was surprised that it's not been hit harder, especially with what like the Wild Sheep Foundation does. I mean, you're trying to protect something that's not very prominent, right? But yeah, so they are all affected by it. And then the other fact about it too is that cattle and sheep can carry EHD but aren't affected.
Wow.
So think about where we've seen EHD the worst. A lot of times Iowa. Well, what's really prominent
Cattle
there?
and sheep.
Beef cattle,
Well,
sheep. All this stuff.
cattle, big time. Hogs to a certain extent. Does it affect hogs?
I haven't seen any documentation of hogs, but yeah. So I mean, to me though, it's the big one is the cattle. So
Big time.
Now you have cattle ponds that are just some of the grossest things in the world, and then those deer drink out of those really bad cattle ponds where the cows just were. The midges fed on those cows, and it honestly just accelerated right there then and there.
Man, and we need to note that there is no connection between EHD and human health, just like there's no connection with CWD and human health. Okay, so let's get to gosh, there's so much I want to talk to you about, Zach, but let's talk about your bread and butter, and that is land management. I know you work with landowners on food plot design. You do tree planting. These could be individual shows, seriously. And seeing that you're so close, I might hit you up for that. Permanent stand construction and placement, which is a really fascinating one. I want to talk about a couple things here quickly before we get off to the food plot seeds.
Yeah.
Hinge cutting.
Yeah.
That's something that came along, I don't know. I've been here way too long. It'll be 30 years here on the 17th of October for me. But hinge cutting came along as an idea for deer hunters probably 15 years ago that people started talking about it. Explain what it is and
Sure.
how you go about it.
Yeah, so hinge cutting practice essentially is cutting through a tree around 2/3 through the diameter of the tree, leaving a little bit of the cambium layer attached still for growth. Felling that tree over to, let's just say, parallel to the ground and making side cover. So it was, and then from there, that tree's gonna allegedly still live. Some cases it won't, depends on the tree species and all that kind of stuff. But it was a quick way to make cover without having to bring a whole logging operation into a property. And to me, it was also another way to provide forage, especially like I think northern, the north woods of Michigan, Wisconsin, northern Minnesota, where we have a hard winter. You can bring food right up to the deer. But that's where it all kind of is stemmed. And now it's been, in my opinion, kind of used to make some of the coolest features of properties, but not every property is a good candidate for it either.
And I'm glad you say that, because one thing as a tree lover, and I am a tree lover, that really bothered me from the beginning, and it bothers me now, and this is no offense to anybody, but the average guy grabbing a chainsaw, growing out there, and taking a red oak, or when you talk about northern woods, a white cedar, my gosh, please don't do that.
Yep.
And then we're going to do some hinge cutting. It's like, so as a biologist who does this,
yes,
how do you approach a property? Okay, I say, Zach, come over here. I want to do some hinge cutting. How do you approach a property to see if it's a good candidate, and then exactly what do you look for when you do it?
Yeah, so first of all, to find out if it's a good candidate, I'm looking right away at tree species. If it's a woods that's full of aspen, I'm not going to recommend it. I'm going to recommend go out there and do some clear cuts, things of that nature. If you have a bunch of softwoods, not preferable. But let's say, like, even my own personal woods, I have a bunch of sugar maples that squirrels have just ruined. They go for the sap actually in the sugar maple. Those trees I hinge. They have no timber value. They're dying essentially already. I like to do those trees or even trees that don't have a lot of habitat or timber value, like let's say ironwood, something like that, or even like a basswood, something that way. So I look for those trees that are like, okay, this is good for us to get on the ground, and it's also going to provide forage and stuff that way. It's like maple, obviously sprouts are great. You get basswood on the ground, that's like candy to the deer. But I'm always first looking at area 2. Like, let's say if we're in southern Wisconsin or southeastern Wisconsin, I even say we don't have a lot of loggers. Well, those are basically, you probably don't even have someone to come in to even cut your land. Well, now let's go in and look and see how we can get that park setting out of here. And I look at for like little bench knobs and contours, and a lot of south-facing hillsides where I know deer could winter up and have that nice protection from the hinging. But I will say I never like to have big pockets. I would say max like an 1/8 acre. That'd be to me a big pocket, a nice doe bedding pocket. But a lot of times I'm going and just cutting some trees here and there that'll open some canopy and maybe just make some periodic bedding points for deer.
Deer Talk Now is brought to you by Traditions. As you probably know, 2 years ago they came out with the Nitro Fire in collaboration with Federal Premium and Hodgdon. The fire stick, they shoot through those guns. This has really changed muzzleloading and has made it more safer, more accurate. Check them out today at traditionsfirearms.com. Do you have problems with when you do this? Okay, so you talk about, especially where we live, and I know this is in cases, and even guys I know in the South, a completely overbrowsed forest. There's no understory, and you go and do this, and you get some sunlight in there. Do you have a problem with like, oh my gosh, I just like created a nightmare with with all these invasives like buckthorn and bush honeysuckle and all this stuff, Japanese barberry, all this stuff starting to grow in? Do you have that problem?
Yeah, so a lot of times, and I've had those clients where they'll have buckthorn, autumn olive, honeysuckle, and all this stuff. A lot of times for those, I'm recommending doing invasive species control before even dropping a tree.
Before doing
100%. Because if you just drop it on top of, let's say, that autumn olive that's right there, it's just going to take that whole void up. But you can also get some beautiful areas that don't have the invasives. Those I like doing because then you start getting goldenrod and ragweed, common mullein, and all these different natives. Because like one thing neat about the soil, and you probably know this, is at all times there's 7 generations of seed in the soil.
Yep.
Well, now if you can get those native seeds back, oh my God, it's gorgeous. But if you already have invasive issue, I would say first direct your attention to that invasive issue. So once you get rid of that, like I had a gentleman, he had a white oak stand. I think he had 20 acres. And these white oaks were past the point of timber value.
Just big
monsters.
Beautiful.
And they were overcrowding each other, so they weren't even producing acorns. So I went there, and he had buckthorn. I said, first, get rid of your buckthorn. Second, it's going to hurt you, but you got to take some of these mature oaks out because they're actually past their point of production. And now he's making this oasis. I mean, it's gorgeous. He got rid of his buckthorn. Now he got rid of these oaks.
So how did he do his buckthorn? How did he try to get rid of that?
Yeah, so first is they went in there and did a full forestry mulching. So they went with the Fecon.
Really? And
got rid of all of it. Then that's
that big thing that just grinds everything up. Okay.
So they went through, and I'll be honest, when you do true invasive species management, you're going to make your land worse before it get better because you're clearing everything. Every tree on the ground, you're trying to get rid of all of it. And then, because you're going to go back through now, and with like a boomless sprayer on a 4-wheeler, or you're going to go with a backpack sprayer, you're going to use something like Garlon, triclopyr, and you're going to go and spray the whole area with that with a carrier of diesel fuel. I mean, you're going to push your deer off for a little bit, but you'll reap those rewards, in a few years.
Do you only have to spray that once?
Typically twice. Twice is usually recommended.
And is there a certain time of year that you're doing? I mean, is it spring and then again in late summer? Or?
Yeah, pretty much all those jobs will be all fall, winter, spring, even into the summer.
So you're mulching, getting in there in spring when things start growing up, and then just killing it.
Yep.
Coming back in a couple months and killing it again.
Yep.
And that's not glyphosate, that's something else?
Correct.
Okay.
It's triclopyr. Yep.
Is that the stuff the foresters use?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I've seen that done on about a 80-acre woodlot.
Yep.
And it was and it looked like a bomb went off.
Oh yeah,
Like you said, it got worse.
I mean, as a biologist, it hurts seeing it because you're destroying the landscape because the invasive destroyed it already. So you're getting rid of all cover, all signs of deer. I mean, that's why I usually, if someone has an issue, I tell them usually to parcel their land off so your deer can rotate around the land as you're doing the work.
That's awesome.
Because if you do it all, I'll kiss hunting goodbye for a few years, 4 or 5 years.
Especially when you're my age. I'm 57, and it's like, well, I want to have a lot of years left.
Yes.
I'm going after Ted's. Ted's on Nugent. He's on his 24th doe today.
Okay.
And he's 75. And I'm like, I want to be you when I get to be 75. But, okay, so what are the first species that you see, Zach, that are starting to come back after a situation like that? Are they the native hardwoods, or it's other things? Yeah,
so a lot of times after that, I'm seeing a little bit of some of the like box elders, and you'll see some of those, nuanced trees that'll kind of pop up. But I'm seeing natives right out of the gate. Like even the spots that I've helped with, I mean, I'll start seeing those native prairie plants already popping up. And this same applies to any realm of invasive species control, whether it be the buckthorn, honeysuckle, autumn olive. Even in aquatics, we've seen this. Like reed canary grass is taking over. You get rid of reed canary grass, that next year, you're going to see all these beautiful native aquatic plants start popping back up.
That is fascinating.
They've just been waiting for the sunlight. That's the only issue. They've been just waiting and hoping, and then they finally start shooting up.
Okay, another sidebar here for you guys. If you really want to learn this stuff, I'm not an expert on it, he is, but I started raising meat rabbits here a few years ago, and I really wanted to know, like, rather than just feeding them what's basically compressed alfalfa pellets, but I feed them hay, I started feeding them all the weeds in my property. And then I want to know what I'm feeding them. So I started, and then I learned not only what are all the different weeds that are on the property, but these are the ones that are native.
Yep.
These are the ones that aren't. Some of them you can't feed to rabbits. But the other thing, too, that you learn is Wikipedia is a great thing. You start learning about, and it's all the DNR agency sites too have this stuff, and that's where I find most of the good information. But you find out what is actually should be there and what shouldn't be there. And the invasives are pretty easy to spot, but then you start learning like, oh, that's not supposed to be here. I have a just terrible problem with buckthorn right now, and I never had it before. And that started coming in because it's a very small part of my property. I mowed the whole thing down and just let it grow all back up. It was all box elders and stuff.
Oh, sure.
Almost grew all back up in buckthorn.
Yeah.
But I'm doing that by hand because it's a small piece. Okay, let's move. There's about 5 other topics there that I would like to talk to you about. Let's talk about the seeds first. So you got involved with rack fuel on seeds.
Yeah.
What is your background on seeds, and what is the difference in product A, product B when you're going to buy specific forages for your deer?
Yes, I mean, really my background on all of it. So I'm a gardener at heart.
Oh my gosh.
And to me,
we're long lost brothers here. This is crazy.
And to me, I guess I always looked at food plotting like I'm growing giant gardens. And well, what are we doing in gardening? We're always changing our seeds, our types, and all this stuff, trying to get the biggest yield, best plants, finding companion plants, all that kind of stuff. So it wasn't that like I went for agronomy or nothing that way. I mean, I've talked to enough agronomists to be dangerous, but when it really developed is I worked with a lot of different companies over the years, especially when I had my show. I had the sponsorships and all this different stuff. And one thing I always found with everyone is they didn't want to change, they didn't want to improve. It was like this is just what we have.
Okay.
Don't change it. And I'm like, well, this isn't working great, or the deer love this. Why don't we change it? No one wanted to change. And when I started going to Tom, and it was like, oh yeah, let's do this. And I wanted always something cutting edge and something new. And because to me, if you're not changing what your deer like, to me it's like my kids. If I keep feeding them the same thing over and over again, they're gonna get sick of it. Well, if you can rotate and all this stuff. So I started talking to agronomists from across the country. I started reaching out to places overseas. I'm trying to get my hands on plants that no one has. Because I want to go, okay, what has higher protein, what has higher calcium, and all these different natures, and what can handle drought more. Like I plant the countryside of Kansas. Well, if you ever planted through yucca and actual cactus,
oh my gosh, yeah,
and you can get something to grow, you just hit a home run. So that was kind of the basis of all this, is me taking my biology background of not wanting monoculture, taking what I learned through gardening and a little bit of work with the other companies, and I just kind of meshed it all. And then I just started kind of planting my own, finding what my deer like.
So it was mostly using, was it blends that you were using?
Yeah, like I did the game of going to co-op and buying stuff out of the bin, right? Because for the longest time, I kind of believed the same stuff, and nothing wrong with doing that. But I went and got stuff out of the bins and planted. I'm like, I think it could be better. Or like there's more of a science to this. So, and I know Tom talked about it on his podcast, but like I have a full Excel spreadsheet of every seed type you can think of out there. And it has their pH ranges, their nutrient needs, all that. And that's how I build the blends and see what works together.
What are some of your favorite blends right now?
So for one, my baby is Showtime from Rack Fuel.
That's the one that they're just killing on mine.
It is the most unique.
What's all in that again?
So plantain, small burnet, chicory, and alfalfa. And it's, to me, I call it the Terminator blend because nothing's beating it. It's just going to keep coming back and coming back. The original one I ever planted of that is now going on 7 years. And all I do is frost seed it.
Really?
It's frost seed, a little bit of mowing.
You frost seeded again with more Showtime?
Yep.
Really?
Just get that next, to me, it's getting that next era of plants, because some are going to phase out because they're just going to die or whatever might happen. Maybe I had a bad winter. But overall, I'm always frost seeding those perennial plots.
You know what's so fascinating? So that is, I've got 4 very small plots. That plot, the deer are absolutely just killing right now. And I'm like, well, why is that? Now, plantain grows abundantly in the ditches by me. Mm-hmm. And that's what I've actually been feeding my rabbits. They love the seed stem.
Yep.
Absolutely love it. It's like candy if I give it to them. That's their treat. But the leaves, they'll eat them.
Yep.
But they're not. But the deer have been hammering it. But I think it's the small burnet that's in that blend that I've never seen before.
Yep.
Is that a brassica?
No, small burnet is actually a prairie forb.
Okay.
Yeah. And, a lot of like the burnet and all that, and plantain, all that stuff. A lot of it comes from actually Western pasture
Really?
grazing. Something to deal with the drought, gave higher calcium loads, things of that nature. But what's cool about the Burnett, and I've seen this a lot on my own property, but is those deer are digging even in February.
Yes.
They're digging through snow to get that Burnett and the plantain. Those are both sticking along, there. They're ready to rock and roll for the deer, even the alfalfa. So now you have a food source that greens up for almost anything, and it's there all the way into the winter. Especially
And it's coming back year after year.
Yep.
I think for me, it's probably exactly what you just said when you started that is it's something new.
Yep.
And they like it. And now they're hitting it.
Yep.
But there's been other things there. But so are you saying it's mostly the blend of the different types of forages? Or what about sourcing your seed?
Oh, 100%. Like if you can go to Joe Schmo down the road that sells seed, you don't know how old it is, you don't know where it came from, if it went through heating, cooling. The source is everything. Now, in obviously in America here, we have some major suppliers, but with that said, it's all about finding the right person that stores it right, that houses it right, gets fresh seed. It's always, even for their own agronomists, they're always looking for new stuff too. But I'd say it all starts with where you get the seed.
Getting quality product.
100%.
And how does that work? Like, are there only a couple, like, let's just say plantain seed.
Mm-hmm.
Are there only a couple places that are growing it for seed, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, like a lot of our seeds, we have to special request. Like they won't have it in the bin.
They're not just like scooping out a bunch of...
I mean, a lot of these we have to special source, essentially, whether it's come from overseas or, a lot of stuff's growing out west, like in Oregon and the Dakotas and stuff that way. But a lot of times they have to go and reach out to the primary supplier to even get it. Well, now we're also getting some of the freshest stuff and making this premium blend.
And that's what I call it. It comes in small tubs, a couple half acre, quarter acre,
Yep.
sometimes more than that. Perfect for a guy who is planting food
Yep.
plots for hunting.
Yep.
Now, if you're doing major planting, how do you handle that?
Yes, like when I go bigger food plots, so a lot of it is like I always, I coin it food plot architecture, the food plot design. I love it.
You got to check out his website. He's got really cool information on this.
To me, it's all about breaking up everything, and that's one thing I'll give a nod to, like Tony LaPratt always talks about is giving parcels on your land to keep your deer on the land as long as possible, and to me that's you can do that with any bigger food plot, and then utilizing different blends from rack fuel. So like you can have this 1/2 acre maybe that's a horseshoe shape of wicked greens, and then within that horseshoe have Own the Season or Checkmate or something different, using different screenings, like we have Hunter's Haven, for instance, and now you can move these deer around and then do what I call making doorways through screens. So I'll go and mow down, use a weed trimmer, even my 4-wheeler, and I'll make doorways through it, and you'll see those deer, we'll just use them like gates. Like I always, on my consults, I'll tell people, it's not that you're treating deer like livestock, but you are.
Yeah.
And if they have an opening, they're not going to blow through something where they can't see the other side. It's always think about the predator. It's always think about coyotes. And if they can have doorways and then they move into a different food plot, and, once again, I always use the analogy of my own 2 kids. One loves chicken nuggets. One loves cheeseburgers. That's it. That's their life. I can't switch the 2 or they'll yell at me. So it's same to me as deer all have their own personality. So why not have as much different varieties and different plants out there as possible? And you're going to find somebody, instead of maybe housing 1 mature buck, maybe now you have 2 visiting that same food plot because one likes Checkmate, one likes Wicked Greens. They don't go on each other's turf until later.
And then they're also checking in on does when there's
100%.
It starts get to be this time of year. It's funny you mentioned that. I did that gateway thing kind of by accident.
Mm-hmm.
I had a bigger plot, just created the new plot that I created this year actually has the Showtime in it. It's a great little spot, but I had my trail. I'm like, why not? I just planted wicked greens on that, and lo and behold, those deer are using that. Like it's like this hallway in this office.
Yep.
They're not just like they're stupid, but they're actually it's changed their travel patterns.
100%.
And how they're using it. And then they're hitting these different little plots. Now, it doesn't have to be, I know the 2 other small plots, I have another one in Showtime, but then I have another one in, you're going to have to help me with it. It's got a lot of chicory in it.
Probably own the season.
Yeah, that one's got a lot of chicory in it,
Yep.
and they're using that same trail to get.
Yep.
They cut one branch is this way, one branch is this way.
Yep.
It's a neat thing. Jay, if you're listening to this, Jay gave me he gave me the terminology. He said it's like your own canvas. He said you have a blank
100%.
canvas,
Yep.
and you can paint
Yep.
the picture that you want. I find it fun, even if I do not. I mean, I love killing deer and all that stuff, but I find it fun to see what they're going to eat, and then doing the land management stuff.
Yeah.
For me, killing the invasives, call me weird, but I'm out there with like little orange ribbons.
Yep.
In winter when there's snow. So I'm like all those. I talk about the bush honeysuckles. I'm waging war on them like I'm waging war on the raccoons, which I didn't get any last night. Same thing, and I find it fun.
Yep.
Okay, well, we're gonna have to stop there. Zach, thank you so much. This is I really could seriously talk to you about this stuff all day long. The EHD stuff I find absolutely fascinating, especially with your background on it.
Yep.
And it's something that I think people just please bring those comments in, because we're going to actually use those. If you guys have been reading the magazine, we started a new page. It's called Real Time, and it's all about the reels that we've been posting, but I'm going to use your comments in there, so please bring them to us. Thanks, Zach, so much. Where can people go to find your website?
Yeah, so my website is creekbottomlandmgmt.com, and then I'm on every social, so you can find me Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all that stuff with a lot of information.
And he's got a blog on there, and he's also got information on what he talks about how he does his management with food plots and stuff, maps, everything. It's really cool. Rack Fuel, go check out the Rack Fuel website for all those blends that he helps create. And then also they also have we've been using that, Ian, it's Cokes.
Yep.
We've been using that. It's a pretty cool thing. But check that stuff out. We're going to catch you guys again next Thursday for another brand new episode. But for Zach Haas, I am Dan Schmidt. Please like and subscribe. That's all we ask you to do. We're not charging for this. Free information. And stay in deer camp and always think deer. We'll catch you next Thursday for another episode of Deer Talk Now.